artifacts made of unknown alloys.
Firstly, had the conception of making this technology, and secondly, ability to actually physically make it. We've had to rethink the history of technology completely as a result of this single object.
Strange objects from outer space. Books written in languages no one has ever seen before. What if the reason we can't explain any of these is because they have extraterrestrial origins? Here are the discoveries by Russian scientists that have left the rest of the world completely without answers. Number 15. Meteoritic minerals in the Dead Sea. In 2021, an international team of researchers studying rocks near the Dead Sea came across something that immediately created a geological problem. Hidden inside the samples was a mineral called alabogdanite, one of the rarest minerals ever identified on Earth. That discovery alone would have been unusual, but it was more shocking when scientists realized where it had been found. The discovery was led by Russian mineralogist Sergei Britvin from St. Petersburg State University, alongside researchers from Italy, Germany, and the United States. And before this moment, alabogdanite had only ever been discovered inside meteorites. The mineral is extremely difficult to form because it requires immense pressure, roughly 25 gigapascals. To understand how extreme that is, it's about 250,000 times the atmospheric pressure humans experience at sea level. Those conditions exist in only a few known environments. One is during the violent impact of a meteorite striking a planet. The other is deep inside Earth's mantle, hundreds of kilometers beneath the surface. In both cases, the pressure is intense enough to rearrange the atomic structure of minerals into forms that cannot normally exist near the surface. The problem is that the Dead Sea region fits neither scenario. There is no confirmed evidence of a major meteorite impact anywhere near this site. There was also no geological pathway connecting the rocks to Earth's deep mantle. The mineral appeared in ordinary surface formations where, according to current geological understanding, it should not have existed at all. What makes the discovery even stranger is the history of alabogdanite itself. The mineral was first identified in 1997 in the Yakutia region of Siberia, also by Russian researchers. In that case, scientists believed it came from a meteorite because no known Earth process could produce it near the surface. But the Dead Sea sample appeared to be terrestrial. That possibility created a much larger question. If alabogdanite can form naturally on Earth without a meteorite impact and without mantle-level pressures, then there may be geological processes happening on this planet that scientists still do not understand. Some researchers have suggested the mineral may have formed during an ancient tectonic event involving extreme localized pressure. Others think there may have been a previously unknown type of impact that left little trace behind. So far, no explanation fully accounts for the evidence. Unlike many mysteries tied to ancient history or folklore, this one is modern, documented, and ongoing. However, next on this list is a much scarier discovery that scientists haven't been able to crack. Number 14, the Tehran UFO incident of 1976. Shortly after midnight on September 19, 1976, people across Tehran began flooding local authorities with calls about a strange glowing object hanging over the city. At first, officials thought it might be a star or a civilian aircraft. But when the reports reached Iranian Air Force General Yousefi, what he saw convinced him enough to order an immediate military response. Captain Mohammad Reza Azizkhani took off in an F-4 Phantom. As he closed to within about 46 kilometers of the object, every instrument on his aircraft failed simultaneously. His radio went dead, navigation gone. His entire cockpit went dark. The moment he turned his aircraft away from the object, everything came back online, as if the jet had crossed some kind of invisible boundary. Assuming the first failure may have been mechanical, the Iranian Air Force launched a second F-4 Phantom. This time, the encounter became even stranger. Lieutenant Parviz Jafari managed to get close enough to detect the object on airborne radar. He later described it as being similar in size to a Boeing 747, though its lighting and movement did not resemble any conventional aircraft. Then the situation escalated. A smaller bright object separated from the main craft and shot directly at his aircraft. Jafari was prepared to fire a missile, but at that moment, his weapon system completely shut down. The moment he broke away, it came back online. Jafari also reported seeing another glowing object descend toward the desert outside Tehran. Witnesses on the ground later claimed they heard a loud sound and saw a bright flash in the area where it appeared to land. Search teams investigated the location the next morning, but found no debris, no crater, and no physical trace of an impact. Nearly 50 years later, the Tehran incident is still one of the most studied military UFO encounters in modern history because so much of it was officially documented. But next in this list, we have an alien body that disappeared before it could be properly documented. Number 13, Oumuamua. Astronomers were scanning the skies from the Haleakala Observatory in Hawaii in October of 2017 when they spotted something that had never been observed before in the history of astronomy. It was a long, narrow object moving through our solar system, and it had clearly come from somewhere else entirely. They named it Oumuamua, which in Hawaiian means messenger from afar arriving first. The name turned out to be fitting because this was the first confirmed interstellar object ever observed entering our solar system from another star system. And almost immediately it began raising questions nobody could comfortably answer. Most objects in space follow predictable behavior. Comets develop glowing tails as ice vaporizes near the sun. Asteroids remain relatively stable and move according to gravity. Oumuamua didn't fully match either category. As astronomers tracked its path, they discovered it was accelerating slightly as it left the solar system. Something appeared to be pushing it. The strange part was that there was no visible comet tail, no surrounding cloud of gas, and no debris trail that would normally explain the increase in speed. But it got even more confusing. While some researchers said that the Oumuamua was possibly 10 times longer than it was wide, others suggested it may have been flat and disc-shaped instead of cigar-shaped. That is when Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb entered the debate. Loeb and graduate student Shmuel Bialy published a paper suggesting that sunlight itself might have been pushing the object forward through radiation pressure. For that to happen, Oumuamua would need to be incredibly thin, similar to a solar sail, a type of technology humans have already experimented with for future spacecraft propulsion. Loeb openly proposed a possibility many scientists were reluctant to discuss, that Oumuamua could have been artificial. The idea sparked immediate controversy across the scientific community. Critics argued there were still possible natural explanations, including theories involving frozen hydrogen, nitrogen ice, or unusual comet behavior. But none of the explanations solved every problem completely. Meanwhile, engineers proposed a concept known as Project Lyra, an ambitious mission that would attempt to chase Oumuamua before it disappeared into deep space. But the object was traveling too fast. By the time serious discussions began, it was already leaving the solar system forever. Today, Oumuamua is still one of the strangest objects ever detected near Earth. Number 12, the Voynich manuscript. Locked away inside Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library is a book that has defeated historians, cryptographers, linguists, and computers for more than 100 years. It is known as the Voynich manuscript, and nobody on Earth can read it. The manuscript is around 240 pages long and filled with dense handwritten text, written in a script unlike anything ever discovered. The strange writing system, now called Voynichese, does not match Latin, Arabic, Hebrew, or any known ancient language. Yet it also does not behave like meaningless nonsense. That is what makes the manuscript so disturbing. It follows real linguistic patterns. The writing flows naturally from left to right. Certain characters appear only at the beginning of words, others only at the end. Statistical studies have shown that the writing contains structure, rhythm, and predictability, which is exactly what is expected from a genuine language or coded message. But no one has been able to decode even a single sentence with certainty. The illustrations inside the book are equally strange. There are drawings of plants that do not exist on Earth, roots from one species attached to leaves from another, with flowers from a third. There are circular diagrams showing star formations that match no known constellation. There are images of women bathing in green pools connected by tubes to biological-looking structures. None of it has been explained. For decades, people questioned whether the manuscript might simply be an elaborate hoax. That theory weakened significantly in 2009 when radiocarbon dating performed at the University of Arizona confirmed that the parchment dates back to between 1404 and 1438. The ink and writing style also appear consistent with that period. Since then, some of the world's best codebreakers have attempted to solve it. During World War II, military cryptographers studied the manuscript without success. In recent years, artificial intelligence systems and computational linguists have analyzed its structure, still without producing a confirmed translation. Several researchers have announced breakthroughs over the years, but every major claim has eventually fallen apart under scrutiny. Today, the manuscript is cataloged as MS408 at Yale, where every page has been digitized and released online for public study. Millions of people have examined it, thousands have tried to decode it, and after all this time, humanity still does not know what the book says, who wrote it, or why it was created. There seems to be a lot more that scientists do not know about the ancient civilization, as the next discovery on the list reveals an engineering marvel that is even more shocking. Number 11. The Antikythera mechanism. In 1900, sponge divers searching the seafloor near the Greek island of Antikythera pulled up something from an ancient shipwreck that looked, at first, like a corroded lump of bronze. For decades, it sat largely ignored in storage at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens because researchers assumed it was little more than debris from the wreck. Then, in the 1950s, British historian Derek de Solla Price used X-ray imaging to look inside it. What he found completely rewrote the history of human technology. Hidden beneath the corrosion was a dense system of carefully crafted bronze gears, fitted together with extraordinary precision, housed in what would have been a wooden case roughly the size of a shoebox. The device was a hand-crank computer revealed to have been built between 150 and 100 BCE. You set a date on the front dial, turned the crank, and it calculated the positions of the sun, the moon, and all 5 planets known to ancient astronomers. It predicted solar and lunar eclipses, tracked the cycles of the ancient Greek games, and modeled the moon's subtle variations in orbit using a slot and pin mechanism that modern engineers have described as brilliant, especially for a machine created over 2,000 years ago. It became known as the Antikythera mechanism. Some experts compared its complexity to medieval astronomical clocks that would not appear in Europe until more than a millennium later. That gap is what makes the discovery so unsettling. Nothing else from the ancient world matches the Antikythera mechanism in terms of mechanical sophistication. In recent years, researchers have continued reconstructing the machine using advanced 3D imaging and computer modeling. The more scientists study it, the stranger the story becomes, because its mechanism reveals an unsettling possibility about the ancient world. If Greek engineers could build something this advanced in 100 BCE, how much knowledge has been completely lost to history? Number 10. The WOW signal. On the night of August 15, 1977, something happened that still bothers scientists nearly 50 years later. Dr. Jerry Emmon was sitting at a table reviewing paper printouts from Ohio State University's Big Ear Radio Telescope, a telescope that had been quietly scanning the sky for signs of extraterrestrial life since 1973. His job was completely routine, but that night was different. He was reviewing the printouts when one sequence of numbers and letters immediately caught his attention. The code read 6EQUJ5, a signal so unusually strong that Amon circled it with a red pen and wrote one word beside it. Wow! That handwritten note would become one of the most famous moments in the history of space exploration. The signal appeared to come from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius and lasted for exactly 72 seconds. That detail mattered because 72 seconds was the maximum amount of time the Big Ear telescope could continuously observe one point in the sky before Earth's rotation moved it out of view. Even stranger, the signal matched the exact pattern scientists expected from a real transmission coming from deep space. It started weak, grew steadily stronger, reached a peak, then slowly faded away as the telescope drifted past it. What truly shocked researchers was the frequency. The transmission was detected near 1,420 megahertz, better known as the hydrogen line. For decades, scientists had believed that if an intelligent civilization wanted to send a message across space, this would be the logical frequency to use because hydrogen is the most common element in the universe, and any intelligent civilization would know it. To broadcast a signal that powerful, the source would have required energy far beyond most human-made radio transmissions at the time. Yet, despite its strength, the signal never appeared again. Over the years, astronomers have repeatedly searched the same region of space using more advanced equipment, but nothing was found. Some scientists later suggested the signal may have come from a hydrogen cloud surrounding a passing comet, but that explanation did not fully match the timing, position, or intensity of the transmission. That leaves the mystery exactly where it started. For 72 seconds, something transmitted a signal powerful enough to cross space and reach Earth. Then, it vanished completely, and to this day, nobody can fully explain what sent it. Number 9. The Baghdad Battery. In 1936, while examining artifacts stored at the National Museum of Iraq, German archaeologist Wilhelm König noticed something unusual about a small clay jar recovered near Baghdad. At first glance, it did not seem especially important. The object was only about 13 centimeters tall and dated back somewhere between 200 BCE and 300 CE, during the Parthian or early Sassanid period. But inside the jar was a carefully assembled combination of materials that immediately caught König's attention. There was a copper cylinder sealed with asphalt, and inside the copper tube was an iron rod. To König, the arrangement looked strangely familiar. The structure closely resembled a simple galvanic cell, the basic principle behind a battery. He proposed that if the jar were filled with an acidic liquid such as vinegar, fermented grape juice, or wine, the iron and copper would create a small electrical current through a chemical reaction. The idea sounded ridiculous to many historians at the time. After all, the accepted history of electricity places the invention of the first true battery in 1800, when Italian physicist Alessandro Volta created the voltaic pile. But then researchers decided to test König's theory. Over the decades, multiple independent teams built replicas of the so-called Baghdad battery, using the same materials found in the original artifact. The results were surprising. When acidic liquids were added, the jars consistently generated measurable voltage, usually between 0.5 and 1.5 volts. That is not enough to power modern electronics, but it is enough to perform simple electrochemical processes. One of the most famous experiments was carried out by German researcher Arne Eggebrecht at the Romer Palacius Museum. Using a reconstructed version of the device filled with grape juice, he reportedly succeeded in electroplating a thin layer of gold onto a small object after several hours. The experiment suggested that ancient craftsmen may have accidentally or intentionally discovered a practical use for electricity nearly 2,000 years before modern science formally described it. Whether intentionally designed or not, someone in ancient Mesopotamia built an object that functions as a battery more than 1,000 years before the modern world supposedly discovered electricity. At the same time, ancient India told stories of a flying machine even before planes were invented. Number 8. The Vimanas of ancient India. Thousands of years before airplanes, rockets, or modern warfare existed, ancient Indian texts described flying machines capable of crossing vast distances through the sky. These machines were called Vimanas. References to them appear in several Sanskrit texts, including sections of the Vedas, the Mahabharata, and later Hindu epics. The descriptions vary, but many portray Vimanas as airborne vehicles powered by mercury vortex engines and solar energy that could move vertically, hover, travel at incredible speed, and sometimes carry devastating weapons that produce blinding flashes of light, shock waves, and heat, capable of destroying entire armies. In certain translations of the Mahabharata, survivors are described suffering symptoms that modern readers often compare to radiation exposure, hair falling out, intense heat, and contaminated water. Most historians have traditionally interpreted these stories as mythology, symbolism, or poetic exaggeration. Ancient cultures around the world described gods flying through the sky and wielding powerful weapons. For centuries, the Vimana stories were viewed in the same category. Then archaeologists started digging at Mohenjo-Daro. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest cities of the ancient Indus Valley civilization, located in what is now Pakistan. When excavations reached street level, researchers found dozens of human skeletons scattered across streets and buildings. Some appeared to have collapsed suddenly where they stood, rather than being formally buried. A few were found close together, leading to speculation that the city may have experienced some kind of abrupt disaster. Researchers also identified areas where bricks and materials showed signs of extreme heat exposure. In some places, surfaces appeared to have been heated to temperatures high enough to produce glass-like textures. This is where the controversy started. Writer David Davenport and others proposed that Mohenjo-Daro may have experienced a catastrophic explosion resembling a modern blast event. Soviet-era reports even circulated claims of unusually high radiation levels in some remains, though these reports were never independently verified using modern scientific standards. Mainstream archaeologists strongly dispute the nuclear destruction theory. Most experts argue that the skeletons were not all from a single event and were deposited over time. They also point out that no confirmed blast crater, radioactive debris field, or physical evidence of an ancient nuclear explosion has ever been found at the site. Still, some questions remain unresolved. Researchers continue debating exactly how certain materials at Mohenjo-Daro were exposed to such high temperatures, and why parts of the city appear to have been abandoned relatively suddenly. The strange overlap between ancient descriptions of devastating airborne weapons and a real archaeological site that still raises difficult questions about how its civilization declined. Number 7. The 300-million-year-old wheel. In 2008, a mine worker at a coking coal facility in the Donetsk region of Ukraine made a discovery that should have been impossible. Embedded deep in a seam of rock, in a layer of coal that geologists date to roughly 300 million years ago, was an object that looked exactly like a wheel, complete with spokes, a rim, and a hub. It was perfectly symmetrical and clearly patterned. The worker reported it. A second similar formation was found shortly after. Then the mine owner stepped in. He prohibited any further investigation and restricted the release of information. The discovery sat classified and largely unknown for over a decade until a mine worker eventually broke the story to a Russian newspaper in 2020. The timeline of this discovery is what transformed it from unusual to deeply controversial. Modern humans did not exist 300 million years ago. Dinosaurs had not even appeared yet. Date back only around 5,500 years to ancient Mesopotamia. If the object truly was artificial, it would completely overturn everything known about human civilization and the history of life on Earth. But there is a major problem with the story. The object was never independently examined by the wider scientific community. Very little official documentation was ever released publicly, and over time, the mine itself ceased operations. That left researchers with only a small number of photographs and secondhand testimony. Geologists who later reviewed the images suggested the wheel may have been a natural concretion, a geological structure formed when minerals accumulate around a central point inside sedimentary rock. Under certain conditions, these formations can produce circular or radial patterns that resemble artificial designs. Still, critics of the natural explanation point to the object's unusual symmetry. Many geological concretions are irregular or distorted, while the Donetsk formation appeared to show spoke-like divisions with remarkable balance. Without direct physical access to the original specimen, however, no definitive analysis could ever be performed, and that is where the mystery remains stuck. Whether it was an extraordinary geological illusion or something far stranger, the unanswered questions surrounding the discovery and the secrecy that followed it became almost as intriguing as the object itself. Number 6. The Baigong Pipes. In 1996, researchers exploring a remote area near Mount Baigong in Qinghai Province, China, discovered something that looked completely out of place. Scattered across the mountainside and extending toward a nearby saltwater lake was a network of metallic pipes embedded in rock. Some were as thin as a toothpick, others were wide enough to crawl through. At first glance, the site looked almost industrial. The problem was that no known civilization was ever supposed to have built anything there. The Baigong region is isolated, harsh, and largely uninhabited. There are no confirmed records of ancient settlements, mining operations, or large-scale construction projects in the area dating back thousands of years. Yet reports surrounding the discovery claim some of the pipe-like formations were roughly 5,000 years old. That immediately triggered speculation. When samples from the structures were analyzed, researchers found they were composed mostly of iron oxide, along with silicon dioxide and calcium oxide, materials commonly found in natural geological formations. But according to reports published in Chinese state media at the time, around 8% of the material could not initially be identified using available reference data. That detail quickly fueled rumors online that the pipes might be evidence of a lost civilization or even something extraterrestrial. Adding to the mystery was the layout itself. Some visitors to the site described the formations as running in straight lines and appearing connected to one another. Nearby caves reportedly contain pipe-like structures leading toward the lake, creating the impression of an ancient drainage or transportation system. But many geologists believe there is a far more ordinary explanation. The leading theory is that the so-called pipes are actually fossilized tree roots or mineralized plant structures. In certain environments, groundwater rich in iron can gradually fill hollow spaces left behind by roots or organic material. Over long periods, the minerals harden into tube-shaped formations that strongly resemble rusted pipes. This process, sometimes called pseudofossil formation, has been documented in several parts of the world. Still, not everyone is fully convinced. However, because the region is difficult to access, many of its questions remain unresolved. Unlike the Baigong pipes, the next discovery on the list provides an answer to the mystery surrounding it. Number 5. The Easter Island statues that walked. One of the most isolated inhabited islands on Earth sits in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, thousands of kilometers from any major continent. Today it is known as Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, and scattered across its landscape are 887 massive stone statues that have confused explorers, archaeologists, and engineers for centuries. When Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen arrived there in 1722, he could hardly believe what he was seeing. Standing along the island's coastline were giant human figures carved from volcanic rock, many towering over 10 meters tall and weighing dozens of tons. Some statues weighed more than 80 tons, roughly as heavy as a fully loaded semi-truck. What made the discovery even harder to understand was the island itself. Rapa Nui is remote, relatively small, and historically lacked metal tools, large draft animals, or wheeled transport. Yet the island's people, the Rapa Nui civilization, somehow carved these enormous monuments from a quarry called Rano Raraku and moved them across rugged terrain for distances reaching up to 18 kilometers. For generations, historians assumed the statues had been dragged horizontally on wooden sledges or rolled on logs. But that explanation created problems. It would have required enormous amounts of timber, contributing to theories that the island's forests were completely destroyed by statue transportation. Archaeologists also found limited evidence for the kind of massive transport infrastructure such a system would demand. Then, researchers began reconsidering something the Rapa Nui people themselves had said all along. According to local oral tradition, the statues did not need to be dragged, they walked. At first, many scientists dismissed the idea as symbolic storytelling, but experiments led by anthropologists Carl Lipo and Terry Hunt changed the discussion dramatically. Using ropes attached to the sides of a replica Moai statue, teams demonstrated that the figures could be moved upright in a controlled rocking motion. By shifting the weight side to side, the statue essentially walked forward. The design of the statues suddenly made much more sense. Many Moai have wide D-shaped bases and lean slightly forward. These are features that improve stability during upright movement. Researchers also noticed that ancient roads leading from the quarry were shaped in ways that supported this rocking transport method. In modern demonstrations, relatively small groups of people successfully moved multi-ton replicas without advanced machinery. But the discovery created another mystery. If the statues were intentionally engineered to move this way, then the Rapa Nui builders possessed a deep practical understanding of balance, weight distribution, and structural mechanics, despite leaving behind no written engineering records explaining how they developed that knowledge. What remains astonishing is how much planning, experimentation, and sophistication it must have taken for an isolated island civilization to make giant stone figures walk across the landscape centuries before modern engineering existed. Number 4. The Abydos hieroglyphs. Inside the Temple of Seti, the first in Abydos, Egypt, there is a stone panel carved into the wall over 3,000 years ago. At first glance, it looks like ordinary Egyptian hieroglyphics carved high along one of the temple walls. But when photographs of the panel began spreading in the modern era, people noticed something strange hidden within the symbols. Several of the carvings appear to resemble modern machines. One shape looks remarkably similar to a helicopter, complete with what appears to be a rotor, tail section, and cockpit. Nearby shapes have been compared to a submarine, a jet aircraft, and even a flying saucer-like craft. The resemblance is strong enough that most people shown the images immediately identify the same objects without prompting. The problem is that the temple was built more than 3,000 years ago. Construction began during the reign of Pharaoh Seti I, around the 13th century BCE, and was later completed by his son, Ramses II. Naturally, theories exploded online. Some people argued the carvings were proof that the ancient Egyptians had advanced technology or knowledge far beyond what historians believe. Others suggested they were evidence of time travelers, lost civilizations, or contact with extraterrestrials. But Egyptologists offer a very different explanation. According to mainstream archaeology, the images are the result of a known phenomenon where older carvings are covered with newer inscriptions. Over time, the plaster and stone between the two layers erode away, causing parts of both inscriptions to merge visually into entirely new shapes. Researchers studying the Abydos panel believe the original hieroglyphs carved under Seti I were later modified during the reign of Ramses II. As centuries passed, weathering exposed fragments from both sets of carvings at once, accidentally creating forms that resemble modern vehicles. This explanation is supported by the fact that overlapping inscriptions are extremely common in ancient Egyptian monuments, especially at sites that underwent repeated renovations over generations. Egyptologists who have examined the carvings up close point out that the shapes only appear modern when viewed in a particular light and from a particular angle. Today, visitors to the temple can still see the carvings for themselves, and whether the images are the result of ancient overlap and erosion or something more mysterious, they remain one of the most debated visual anomalies in Egyptian archaeology. Number 3. The man who attracts meteorites. In the small village of Gornja Lamovita in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there is a man named Radivoje Lajic, whose house has been struck by confirmed meteorites on at least 6 separate occasions. Since 2007, rocks from outer space have repeatedly crashed into his home. Each time a rock fell, Lajic collected it and contacted scientists. Each time, the analysis came back the same: genuine meteorite originating from beyond Earth's atmosphere. Some damaged the roof. Others landed in the yard or the nearby areas surrounding the house. After the first impacts, Lajic assumed it was a bizarre coincidence. But as the strikes continued over the years, the story began attracting international attention. Scientists and journalists visited the property, trying to understand why one specific home seemed to be repeatedly targeted, while neighboring houses remained untouched. Researchers searched for anything unusual beneath the property. They checked for abnormal magnetic fields or concentrations of metal that might somehow attract meteorites. Nothing significant was found. The land appeared completely ordinary. That is what makes the case so strange. Meteorite strikes are already extremely rare events. Most space rocks burn up in the atmosphere long before reaching the ground, and the vast majority of surviving fragments fall harmlessly into oceans, deserts, forests, or uninhabited regions. The odds of a meteorite hitting a specific house are considered extraordinarily low. Lajic eventually reinforced his roof with steel beams after repeated damage from falling debris. In interviews, he developed a dry sense of humor about the situation, joking that aliens may have something against him personally. At the same time, he admitted the phenomenon unexpectedly helped his finances. Curious visitors began traveling to the village to see the house and the meteorite collection for themselves. Some locals even noticed a pattern. Several impacts reportedly occurred during rainy weather, leading villagers to jokingly claim that meteorites prefer the rain. Scientists, however, remain cautious about assigning meaning to the events. From a statistical perspective, unlikely streaks can occasionally happen naturally, even when the odds seem impossible. But no one has produced a convincing explanation for why this one property experienced repeated direct strikes while surrounding homes did not. Today, Radivoje Lajic's house is still one of the strangest cases of repeated meteorite impacts ever documented. Number 2. The zigzags of the Gobi Desert. In 2011, a researcher browsing satellite images on Google Maps noticed something bizarre in the middle of the Gobi Desert in northern China. Massive zigzag patterns were carved into the earth, each line stretching for close to a mile, forming large, precise geometric shapes that were clearly not natural. The structures were so massive that they could only really be understood from high above. and nobody immediately knew what they were. The images spread quickly online, and speculation exploded almost overnight. Some people believed the formations were ancient geoglyphs, similar to the Nazca lines in Peru. Others claimed they were coded messages designed to be seen from space. More extreme theories suggested alien communication markers or secret experimental technology. Part of what fueled the mystery was the location itself. The Gobi Desert is one of the most remote regions on Earth. Vast sections are sparsely populated and difficult to access, making independent investigation nearly impossible for ordinary people. When strange structures appear in places like that, speculation tends to grow faster than facts. But in this case, a more grounded explanation eventually emerged. Professor Jonathan Hill from Arizona State University identified the formations as calibration targets used for satellite imaging systems. In simple terms, they function as giant measuring tools for spy satellites and reconnaissance cameras orbiting Earth. The idea is surprisingly practical. Large geometric grids placed in open desert terrain make ideal calibration markers because they are stable, highly visible, and unaffected by urban development. China was not alone in building them. Similar calibration ranges have been identified in the deserts of the United States, particularly in Arizona and Nevada, where American military and intelligence agencies test imaging systems and aerial surveillance equipment. Once researchers compared the Chinese patterns to known calibration sites elsewhere, the mystery became far less supernatural. The Gobi Desert patterns turned out not to be evidence of aliens or ancient civilizations. They were evidence of the vast scale of modern surveillance technology operating quietly in places most people will never visit. Number 1. The meteorite from Mars. On December 27, 1984, geologist Roberta Score was surveying a frozen region of Antarctica near the Allen Hills mountain range when she noticed a small dark rock sitting on the ice. She collected it and marked it as a meteorite. The rock was cataloged as ALH84001 and placed in storage. A decade passed. Then, in 1996, a team led by NASA scientist Dr. David McKay announced something that immediately stunned the scientific world. According to their analysis, ALH84001 was not an ordinary meteorite. It was a piece of Mars, and it may have contained evidence of ancient extraterrestrial life. The rock itself had an incredible history. Scientists determined it originally formed on Mars roughly 4 billion years ago. Millions of years later, a massive asteroid impact blasted it off the Martian surface and sent it drifting through space before it eventually landed in Antarctica around 13,000 years ago. Inside the meteorite, researchers identified several features they believed pointed toward biology. The rock contained carbonate minerals, typically associated with liquid water, suggesting Mars once had environments capable of supporting life. It also contained organic compounds known as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, molecules that on Earth are often connected to the breakdown of biological material. But the most controversial findings were microscopic. Under powerful electron microscopes, scientists observed tiny structures that resembled fossilized bacteria. And most significantly, it contained crystals of a compound called magnetite, chemically pure and structurally perfect in a way that, at the time, was only known to be produced by living bacteria. Many scientists argued that none of the evidence conclusively proved biology. Chemical reactions unrelated to life can also create carbonate minerals and organic compounds. Critics pointed out that the fossil-like structures were far smaller than known living cells, raising questions about whether they could realistically support biological functions. The magnetite crystals became the center of the debate. Some researchers insisted their purity and shape strongly suggested biological origins. Others demonstrated that similar crystals might form through rare, non-living geological processes under specific conditions. Nearly 30 years later, that argument has never been fully settled, and it has become clear that some of the most important questions humanity has ever asked are still very much unanswered. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more fascinating stories.